Welcome to the Critic and the Plebe. I'm Ben. I'm the critic.
And I'm Caitlin. I am the plebe. This is a podcast where we take turns choosing movies to offer our different perspectives and to hopefully entertain and or inform you all.
A brief warning. This podcast may contain adult content and will definitely contain spoilers. If you haven't seen X-Men Dark Phoenix and don't want anything given away, please go see the film and come back later to listen.
Ladies and gentlemen of NASA, this is Charles Xavier. Help is on the way.
We're doing space missions now. Cool.
We get the astronauts, we bring them home. Go!
The heat signature's rising fast.
We gotta get out of here.
Where's Jean?
Where is she? Jean!
She should be dead.
Did you hear what the kids are calling you? Phoenix.
Hello, Jean. Who are you? The better question is, who are you?
Something's happening to me.
When I lose control, bad things happen.
So today's film on the Critic and the Plebe is Dark Phoenix. It is a 2019 movie, superhero movie, released in the year 2019. And the director is Simon Kinberg. Who's in this movie? Who do we got? We have James McAvoy as Professor X. We have Michael Fassbender as Magneto. We have Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique.
Sophie Turner, man. She's like the title of the movie. You can't forget her.
All
So we kind of picked this movie together. This is one of our joint picks, which we don't often do, or that's not the plan at least, is for both of us to pick.
Yeah, I know that the intro said that, this is a podcast where one of us picks a movie, but we're already starting this podcast off on a foundation of lies.
But why did we want to see this one?
I've grown up with the X-Men. I've loved them since middle school. It just seemed like just the whole mutant story and them seeming out of place, and it just really let adolescent me connect to something, and I connected to them more than most superheroes.
I had never watched them until we started dating, and you introduced them to me. But I really liked them right away, too. Just the mutant kind of aspect, I think, was a natural way to have superheroes in a world, whereas I feel like not all superhero universes do that sometimes.
How would you describe the plot of Dark Phoenix?
So it kind of builds on the previous X-Men movies. We kind of start with a flashback of Jean Grey, and really the whole movie is kind of about her inner turmoil. And this very start of the movie kind of shows where that inner turmoil started, I suppose, when she was a kid. And then we flash back to the present in this particular universe. And
1992.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. And then it's really the X-Men at this point have become kind of like a superhero team, and Professor X even like jokes about being called superheroes, like, oh, they used to call us so much worse. We used to be mutants.
Yeah, one of the very few laugh lines of the film.
Yeah. Clever quip.
Yeah, very, very funny. He knows how to rev up that White House dinner crowd.
But I actually liked that idea that Professor X was kind of balancing this dangerous turntable of the mutants are now considered really positive in the world, but if one thing were to go wrong, it would immediately go back to the normal humans kind of fearing the mutants.
I mean, it's sort of like any sort of minority representation or representative. Like you think back when Obama became president, he had to be, perfect.
And Jean Grey threatens to throw that balance off. And that's kind of where the plot of the movie kind of kicks in, especially since her power increases through space means.
Yeah, it looks like a little galaxy smoke thing.
It looked like an Obscurial, but purple.
It does look like an Obscurial, and
Yeah.
that is what really augments her power to
Yeah.
levels that
It
have
kind of
not
acts
been
like
seen.
an Obscurial too. It infuses itself with Jean, and she becomes more powerful, but also has a hard time controlling her power.
For non-Harry Potter nerds, an Obscurial is, well, Caitlin can explain it a lot better
Yeah,
than I can.
thank you. An Obscurial is essentially a dark force that is only able to exert its power when it's attached to a host, and the Obscurial kind of latches onto that, and then it makes it very difficult for that person to move around safely without their power kind of just breaking out of them. And that's really similar for Jean in this movie, is that she constantly is saying, I don't know what's happening to me. What's happening to me throughout the movie.
At least a dozen times, and usually at least thrice within like a 2-minute span. Like, because there are a lot of repetitive scenes in this movie that
Yeah,
I'm
where
sure.
she's like bouncing around looking for people to essentially accept her,
Yeah,
so she doesn't feel abandoned anymore.
that's true.
That's kind of her big problem. That was a general overview of the plot.
That was the goal, at least. But now we're just going to sort of dive into discussion. We're going to try to base it around chronology. We open on the aforementioned inner turmoil, or the dark part of the past that Jean Grey / Sophie Turner has. And she's a little girl. She's riding in the car, and a song's on the radio. And we learned in the credits that that song is actually a Glenn Campbell one called By the Time I Get to Phoenix, or something like that, which, guys, do you remember the movie title? You remember the movie title? What was it?
Dark Phoenix.
It was Dark Phoenix, so...
We plebes can't read.
So it's a clever, eagle-eared listeners may note that Phoenix is both in that song title and in the movie title.
They may note.
So listening to the radio, but Jean Grey doesn't like this at all. She's kind of, it seems like she's just mad about the radio, does it not? She's a little mad about, like, the song, what's going
I don't know if
on.
I'd say that she was mad. I think for her it was just kind of she wanted to listen to different music, and that impulse of, like, wanting something caused her power to kind of just start to come out, and that's what made her upset, is when she noticed that it was coming out without her control, that she started to freak out.
That's true. Yeah, it's kind of like that id desire,
Yeah.
which later on, when she gets injected with the space cloud obscurial thing, they actually describe her at one point as she's all desire, she's all id. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of interesting to look back at that scene. It seems a little less silly now. It's not just that she wanted to change the radio that she freaked out. It's really just a hint of this.
Yeah, no, I didn't think that opening scene was silly at all. I actually really liked that scene because most of the difficulties that we have as adults start in childhood and the fears that we develop as we get older. And I think that was a really, a good way of showing how, and she says it in the movie, almost everything she touches or gets near breaks. Or she breaks things. She says that a lot. And in that movie, she causes a car accident that ultimately results in the death of her parents, or so she is told by Professor X.
We've got this radio debacle and this whole thing. She's trying to change the channel, but it turns into a freak out where... Does she veer her parents' car into the other car because she can't control it? That's kind of what it seemed like.
It looked like she made her mom, pass out, and because mom is driving, the car veers right into a truck, and then huge collision. Car spins in the air 2 or 3 times.
That's the dark part of the past that Jean Grey has. Professor X comes along, swoops her up, and says, hey, come on over to my school of mutants. This will be your new family, and you're special. Never forget that you're special.
And you're not broken.
Yep, you're not broken. You're not some weirdo. I'm going to give you a new family because, according to me, your family is dead.
And then we flash forward to the future where the X-Men are kind of beloved by the people. They go on this rescue mission to space to save some astronauts that, for whatever reason, are having a problem. They don't know why they're having the problem yet, and when they get up there, they see Space Cloud.
We could just call it the Dark Phoenix, the spirit of the Phoenix,
suppose,
I guess.
Yeah, Dark Phoenix.
They run into that space cloud, and they're extracting these astronauts from, a ship that got near the space cloud or something. Apparently, the NASA technology is unable to handle space cloud, and they can't even fly by it. But the X-Jet is perfectly fine. The X-Jet is more advanced than NASA technology. The X-Men can go in there. Nightcrawler, the blue guy with the tail who teleports.
I love Nightcrawler.
I do too. He was always my favorite X-Men when I was growing up, and
Yeah.
he's still hasn't. I mean, especially in these past two X-Men Apocalypse and this one, he hasn't been given the most screen time.
I
But
feel like he had quite a bit in this. He was pretty important for a lot of the missions.
I mean, pretty important. But I guess by screen time, I mean like we don't really get a sense of who he is and development.
Sure, yeah. But in the course of the mission, they get all the astronauts out, but Jean ends up being kind of left in the spaceship trying to hold everything together and gets overwhelmed by this space cloud, which is kind of attracted to her. And she essentially absorbs it, and it essentially explodes, but she is okay. Like, all the other X-Men are gasping and horrified because she should be dead.
Yeah.
But then Nightcrawler goes and gets her and brings her back, and she's fine, and she says she feels better than ever. She feels, like, turned up.
And that's another thing that she says about a dozen times within the first half hour of the movie. You know,
Better than
people
ever.
ask, "Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay?" Better than ever, better than ever, better than ever. It is a skipping record of a screenplay. Then a problem arises, and that problem is that Professor X has what has he done exactly? How would you describe it?
To Jean, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, when Jean was little, it seemed like he put kind of blocks in her mind to protect her from herself and her past trauma.
Completely blocks away like the car accident and how she caused the car accident.
The memory of her father.
Exactly, because her father is still alive, we find out pretty soon.
And Jean's at the point now where her power kind of bursts out of her. There's like a little celebration party to celebrate how well the X-Men did, and Jean's power bursts out of her, and when she is asleep, Professor X tries to go into her mind, but he can't because she's too powerful. So he uses Cerebro to try and get in her mind, and while in there, he's realizing that the walls that he put up are now gone.
Meanwhile, upstairs at the school, all these blockages are going away, all the illusions that Professor X has set up for her are deteriorating, and she realizes, hey, my dad's still out there, I gotta go see my pa.
So she goes and sees him, and Dad is less than enthusiastic about seeing her. You can tell right away that her dad is really uncomfortable. And we find out when Jean reads his mind that after the car accident, he did not want Jean. This obviously hurts her feelings a little bit, and she kind of goes berserk.
I mean, I think anybody would go berserk if you're,
Yeah, I don't blame her.
if your estranged father said to you, the thing that you did accidentally when you were a kid, my life was gone that day.
Yeah, you ruined my life, essentially.
Yeah.
For something that you didn't mean to do. And he's scared of her. The other X-Men come to kind of save her and try to find her, and a battle ensues in which Jean, not meaning to, kills Mystique.
Jennifer Lawrence is out.
You could tell that she kind of wanted to be.
Yes, you could also tell throughout her scenes that she definitely wanted to be out. And we both read, if we were talking about how we both read some articles over the past few years where she's been not so much wanted to be on board with Dark Phoenix or with the X-Men. She's getting kind of sick of it. And, I mean, she only lasts about roughly a half hour in the movie before she is killed.
With a sort of glorious end. Like, I felt like they were pushing it a little bit to feel more dramatic than it actually ended up being.
Yeah.
Like, just the dialogue leading up to it where she's trying so hard to help Jean so that she can go out on a high note, and then Jean kills her.
I mean, the whole movie kind of has that problem of needing to and wanting to have this operatic, dramatic, glorious ending to this leg of the X-Men series, but it's just honestly too bland to really pull anything off.
Yeah, it falls flat.
Falls flat more often than not.
So then Jean goes to find feeling abandoned by the other X-Men.
Well, we should say meanwhile, we got to think about Jessica Chastain here. Meanwhile, we have Jessica Chastain at a random dinner party not really any context, just sort of cuts to Jessica
yeah.
Chastain at the dinner. All of a sudden, her dog's barking, and her husband, who seems like a real dick in the movie.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, he just seemed like a super dick. Anyway, she goes out to quiet the dog. There are these random aliens that come out approaching her in the woods. One alien kills her, but these are shape-shifting aliens. So the alien that killed her takes on Jessica Chastain's form and goes back into the dinner party. And I think she proceeds to kill all the dinner party guests.
Definitely seemed like it.
And we don't get a name in the film for Jessica Chastain's alien character.
Or for the aliens themselves.
Or for the aliens themselves. But I looked on Letterboxd just to see what her character's name was, and apparently it is Vuk. V-U-K.
Vuk.
Either Vuk or Vuk.
Vuk? Vuk.
Vuk,
I don't know which I like better.
I mean, I don't like either.
Yeah, good point.
Neither are fantastic names. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense for an alien, but I've got earth ears, and it just doesn't ring true to me. I wouldn't choose it for a baby name. I don't think you're going to see Vuk on the top 5 baby names anytime soon.
Nope. So back to Jean, who is trying to figure out her power and goes to Magneto, who has this, like, island of mutants where he can live peacefully with other mutants now. That was given to him by the U.S. government, apparently.
I think he calls it the Isle of Misfit Toys.
No, he doesn't. It's not Rudolph. But she goes there and basically asks Magneto for help and asks him how he stopped hurting people.
Which is a weird question. I thought that was a weird way to go about it.
Yeah.
Like, her first instinct is to go to this guy who has dabbled in mass murder in the past.
His has always been conscious, though. Hers isn't necessarily conscious.
Exactly. He's, like, making these complex plans, and he's got an ideology behind it. And, well, hers, like you're saying, is unconscious. It's this pure id-like force, sort of like how we've been talking about before.
And then the military finds Jean there, and Jean, like, kind of destroys them, and Magneto is not cool with that, and he tries to save them. Jean feels abandoned again, so she leaves. She flies away.
And Magneto is still on his island, and Magneto also still has no idea that Mystique is dead, but he does ask about the blood on Jean Grey's shirt. That is a very astute question. That's just a good rule of thumb. When you see blood on somebody's shirt, you should probably inquire about it, and he does. We can give him credit for that. I mean, he's not extremely well written otherwise, but he does seem to contain a modicum of human logic.
Now, what do they do next?
They definitely do something.
It probably says something about the movie that we can't really remember.
Yeah, it definitely does.
Where they go next. All I can remember next is, like, the next, like, fight scene where Hank, or Beast, is mad that Raven is dead. Oh yeah, they're all grieving Raven.
Yep, they're
grieving Mystique, and Hank is obviously very upset that Raven is dead. He blames Professor X, who...
Because Hank and Raven, I should add, had kind of a thing in the past few movies.
Yeah.
It kind of dropped off completely in Apocalypse, but certainly in First Class, they had sort of a budding romance.
Yeah. But Professor X can't admit that he did anything wrong, or that he had any fault in this. And it kind of drives Hank to want to go visit Magneto and be like, I want you to help me find Jean so I can get rid of her.
So Hank steals the X-Jet, flies to Magneto's Isle of Misfit Mutants, and then Magneto, Hank / Beast, and then we have 2 of Magneto's, apparently his finest mutant friends on this mutant island, one of which is Lady with 2 Knives.
Yep, and she can do something with her brain. She, like, flickers her eyelids at some point, but we never actually figure out what she does.
And it's, like, half referred to that she can also control people's minds.
Yeah.
During a battle scene that comes up after this. And then we have unnamed Dreadlock Man,
whose power is having hair that he can fling at people.
Yeah, it's just these long prehensile dreadlocks.
Uh-huh.
So he's just this Rasta mutant going around and whipping people with his greasy dreads.
Were they greasy?
I mean, all dreadlocks are greasy. You gotta, like, congeal or literally like curdle your hair to get them.
Really?
My only frame of reference for dreadlocks and dreadlock maintenance is my old roommate's sister, because she had dreads for a little while. And that's how he described what she had to do. If anybody has any tips on dreadlock maintenance or dreadlock history, you can,
well, I think
write
it's
on our
different
Facebook
depending on your hair
page or
type.
tweet at us, do something like that. because this is a pressing matter when it comes to X-Men Dark Phoenix.
It's not.
Major part of the plot.
No.
But the next part of the plot we get into is the fight between the Magneto group
Yeah.
and then
His band of
the
misfits.
and then Professor X and
Just all the other
the
X-Men,
remaining-
Nightcrawler and Storm.
Nightcrawler,
And Cyclops.
Cyclops, Storm, and Professor X, and Magneto, the Beast, and Dreadlocks and Dagger Lady. They converge in New York City, where Jean Grey is, because they've located her.
And by this point, Alien Jessica Chastain, Vukvuk, has found Jean and has told her that her power can be used. Basically, she kind of explains what the power is, and that it's essentially a way for her to either destroy worlds or create worlds. But only someone like really, really strong can possess such power.
Exactly.
Which is why Purple Space Cloud was attracted to her.
Basically, Vukvuk is essentially her life coach for a little bit. Like, it's not really
Yeah.
clear why she's hanging out. I mean, beyond the fact that she has this power.
And her alien race wants the power. Or they want somebody to control the power. It doesn't seem like they necessarily care who.
At first, it definitely doesn't. It really doesn't seem like she has any ulterior motives or anything like that.
Well, they say if she can't control it, we'll kill it. Didn't they?
That sounds like that would have made sense. I mean, to give it some sort of stakes or to give Jessica Chastain a reason to exist in the movie.
So then Magneto tries to kill Jean. Doesn't work, because she's, like, ultra powerful. And then Professor X, meanwhile, like, battle between all of the X-Men, all the mutants. And Professor X finds his way in with Nightcrawler and talks to Jean about it. Kind of talks her down and just reminds her that, like, look into my mind. She's about to kill him. But, like, when she looks into his mind, she sees all the times when he told her as a child, you know, like, this is your family. You could be happy with us. You're not broken. I can help you. We want to help you. And she kind of realizes that they didn't abandon her. They were always there for her. So then she decides that she wants to get rid of the power, and alien Jessica Chastain is like, cool, I'll take it, and then they hug.
Yeah, they hug it out a little bit, and apparently that's the way to transfer...
That's how you transfer the power.
To transfer a space entity
A nice
from one
hug.
body to another. It just needs to be a warm hug. Or maybe the shape-shifting aliens have some sort of specific way to do it.
Ability, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it's like Avatar with their ponytails. They plug it in to fly the beasts.
Maybe.
But I didn't see any ponytail plugging for this. It was just a good old-fashioned hug.
In Avatar, they plug their hair in to fly things?
They do. They
That's
do a
weird.
lot with their ponytails. It's a very ponytail-centric culture in Avatar.
Weird.
Just as Dark Phoenix is all about dreadlocks, Avatar is really all about ponytails.
So during their hug, Jessica Chastain takes almost all of Jean's power, and Professor X is like, no, you're killing her. So Jean kind of decides to stop the hug. Or no, Cyclops comes in and like laser beams Alien off of Jean. So Jean retains some of this power. And doesn't the military kind of get in there and get all the mutants up?
Yeah, they see that some shit's going down in New York City / this hotel where this is all being staged. They put them immediately on a train to a mutant containment facility. Although I don't think... Did Dreadlocks make it out of this fight? I think he might
Yeah,
have...
he did. No, he did. He was on the train.
Okay, yeah.
He was there. He just
Okay.
didn't say anything because he's not important
That's true.
at all.
That's true. He's not. Anyway, they're on this train, and Jean is also on the train, but Jessica Chastain and her fellow shape-shifting aliens are close behind, and the train goes through a tunnel, and there's this shot in the dark tunnel of the train light coming forward, but it illuminates the silhouettes of these people like crawling on the sides of the tunnel about to jump on the train.
Which they do.
Which they do, and they commence directly to train punching. You see about a dozen of these shape-shifting aliens on top of the train,
Probably
just
more.
punching.
To get inside, because they're trying to get to Jean to get the last of the power.
Apparently it was only like, I don't know, I'm going to guess Jessica Chastain only hugged out about 75% of the power or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's probably about right.
There's a bit left over, and it's not good enough yet, so they need to track down Jean Grey. So they punch their way into the train, and a fight ensues. And the fight reminded me of Snowpiercer. It was actually it was one of my favorite parts of the movie, really. I appreciated that we don't get this whole galactic superhero, like we're used to in Avengers and Marvel movies now. Like, I feel like there's such a giant canvas for so many of these fights, and you don't really know what the space is like and everything. But I appreciate that it's contained. It's contained. It's a bit more interesting to watch than what I'm used to. So that was nice, and everybody gets the chance to showcase their powers there.
Military guys are not doing well at all. But the mutants, when they're fighting together, they kind of have like this moment where they're like, we're all friends again. And then they all start fighting the aliens, and they're doing pretty well, and they take care of almost all of them.
Well, do they do pretty well? There is a casualty.
Who?
A very important casualty of
One of Magneto's
Lady
buddies
Dagger
from
mind.
Yeah, Lady Dagger.
Yeah.
She kind of like flies out of the train, but it's like 2 seconds in the movie.
And Magneto has a very emotional reaction.
No.
He does. He's just like he's like
kinda
looking.
goes like, "Oh!"
There's like a close up, and he looks very emotional.
Well, I mean, I think you'd be sad if anyone flew out of a train and died, but I feel like
not that
I
sad.
feel
There
like
is
he
some
wasn't
history
emotional
there.
enough.
There is some history there between them. I
Well,
feel
then he should have been more emotional.
I feel like they might have been hooking up a little bit back on the Isle of Misfit Mutants.
They were definitely buds, and yes, he was sad when she left, but I don't think anyone in the audience was sad. None of us really cared.
None of us cared about Dagger Lady, but I mean, we should care about the rest of the characters too, which I guess we'll get into with final analysis.
Yeah, but they fare well in the fight, with the one exception, until alien Jessica Chastain comes in. She kind of destroys basically all of the mutants, or knocks all of them out.
She vucks everything up.
They eventually, Professor X and Cyclops have made their way into Jean and are trying to kind of like rouse her, and Cyclops is using his laser beam to shoot away any of the aliens that are trying to get into her. Jessica Chastain comes in, and Jean has this epiphany moment after Professor X and her are talking in his mind, where she says that she knows what she needs to do now. She needs to protect her family, and she's realized that these people are her family. So she wakes up and pretty effortlessly, like, saves all of the other mutants. And then her and Jessica Chastain, instead of hugging, have a throat grab. And Jean says that her emotions do not make her weak, they make her strong.
My emotions make me strong.
Compelling line.
Yeah, very compelling line. One of countless
Very original
in this movie. And it's honestly the best line I've heard in a movie since Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, with our favorite line in that one. Which, of course, is, do you know what the strongest force in the galaxy is?
Love.
Love.
Yeah, it's about that level of, like, this line should be really powerful, but the writing is so, like, bleh, that it does nothing, and it more just stands out as silly.
And it was.
Yeah, it was silly.
However, it's enough to push Jean Grey over the edge and finally defeat Vuk Jessica Chastain.
Yep.
And she is
Vaporizes
obliterated.
her. But it also kind of, the power enfolds in on Jean, and she is no longer there in her human form.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, kind of in the ending sequence of the movie.
Well, let's talk about that ending sequence a little bit, because it zooms out, well, not zooms out, but it cuts away from this battle, sort of, dark fade away. Everybody's looking up at the sky, just like, oh, where's Jean? Where's Jean? What happened to her? But that entity is absorbing her, and it is just the entity flying off now. And we see a phoenix, the flames of a phoenix, which was cool. That was cool.
She almost looks now that she has, like, fully absorbed this power, like a godlike force floating through the air.
Cut to ending montage, and Cyclops is walking up to the front of the school, and there's a new sign on the X-Men school.
It's not Professor X's school for gifted youngsters. Now it's Jean Grey's school for gifted youngsters, and Hank is the headmaster now.
We walk into Professor X's office, we see an empty chair, but Hank sits down in it. And, of course, he has a picture of Raven/Mystique framed on his desk. But it's her in her most previous X-Men suit, which I feel like,
The one from the movie.
yeah, I mean, yeah, the one from this movie. But I just feel like there could have been a better picture than like her work photo, you know?
Yeah. It looked like one of like the paparazzi photos that they took when they just came back from space. It wasn't very personal.
If it was like my long lost lover that I was, looking for, I wouldn't like cut out that lover's driver's license photo and put it on my desk. I wouldn't be pining for that from beyond the grave. I mean,
Which is probably why that moment didn't have quite the emotional, or at least part of the reason it didn't have the emotional heft that it could have. Should have.
that's kind of the problem with the ending, with the movie. It doesn't have the emotional heft that it should have. And the next scene doesn't have the emotional heft that it should have, which we have Charles Xavier in Gay Paris. And
Having cafe. And then Magneto shows up with a portable chessboard. We find out Professor X is retired. And Magneto is like, I can give you a home. Let's be happy in retirement. How about a game of chess?
just like they've always played. Like throughout the whole series, when it was Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart, they played chess. They played a little chess in X-Men First Class. It's their
they're
thing.
Great minds.
It is a motif. Great minds playing chess. Camera tilts up to the sky, and what do we see above the Eiffel Tower?
Firebird.
We see the Firebird. We see the Phoenix entity still in the sky.
So what'd you think?
We're both educators in real life, and we're used to the grading scale, the good old A through F. We share our grades and we share a bit of reasoning. Then we'll have some time to perhaps share some rebuttals with one another.
You go first.
I would grade X-Men Dark Phoenix a D minus.
Ooh, harsh.
A D minus.
Way harsh.
This was a bland movie. There was not once did it engage me. And these are characters that I've been following for at least 15 years. I was never once emotionally compelled. I was never once that involved in the action. Did not feel empathy for any of them and their experiences. And I know these people. Or I feel like I know these people or knew these people. But all we have in X-Men Dark Phoenix are just sort of cardboard cutouts of the characters reciting this just terrible dialogue and having this really pallid, really just insipid, bland direction that's really going nowhere. Like the staging doesn't work. None of the scenes really set up the stakes very well. Like it's just sort of unacceptable to have something like that with a long-running franchise in a post-Endgame world. That doesn't make sense that you wouldn't rely on character as opposed to just sort of rotely going through this so-called plot. Not quite the worst X-Men film. I think that still goes to X-Men Origins Wolverine for me. But it is way down there.
I agree with a lot of what you said. Like, I definitely think that the plot was really just its purpose was to hit the plot beats that a superhero movie needs to hit without actually going any deeper. I wouldn't grade it quite as harsh. I think it's very average. So my grade, I'm inclined to say a C, like very average, right in the middle, because I feel like if I'm going to give a movie a D or an F, I have to consider it a bad movie. Like, when I look at it as a movie, did it, like, do things that I feel like a movie should do? Yeah, it hit all of those points.
Like what? What did it do?
I mean, it followed a superhero movie. I mean, you've got your character, you've got your turmoil, and I honestly liked Jean Grey's story. She's my favorite mutant because I really like how that internal struggle is manifested. As I think so many people have their own internal struggles, and seeing like a physical representation of that I think is really cool. So I like a movie kind of centered around that theme, but I do think it could have been done way better. Like the dialogue is not great. It's very simple. It's pretty bland. It doesn't make me care much about the characters, but I think the overall point is still there. It's like even when people have that inner turmoil, you can find people who are going to support you. And ultimately, all of the other mutants do that, even if it's hard for them. So, like, and I don't think it's a bad movie. I mean, visually, it was nice. The action was cool, I guess. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad. I'd just say it was fine.
I don't know, that's overly generous. A C is overly generous to me.
I think a D minus.
I mean,
is
what you
overly
described is that your highest praise for the film just now was that it hits plot beats.
Yeah.
It hits your generic superhero plot beats.
Well, that's why it's not a bad movie. It is, by all accounts, objectively a movie. Like, if I'm going to give something a D and an F, it's got to be, like, real bad.
I just feel like you're describing a coloring book that isn't colored in, and you're giving credit to the coloring book for just having the lines there. But with no color, no uniqueness, no anything.
I would say that I think that it's colored in, but it's not colored in a unique way. Like, it's like basic. You got your red, blue, yellow, your primary colors, and that's it. Like, which makes me say, like, C, like, right in the middle.
I barely even see it colored in. It's just gray to me. It did have a troubled production history. This movie's been on the shelf for at least 2.5 years.
Which I think kind of speaks to the fact that they must have known that it wasn't a great way to end off that X-Men saga.
That wraps up this episode of Dark Phoenix. If you're liking the podcast, you can find us on YouTube. We're going to set up some letterbox pages. Look up the Critic and the Plebe. Follow us, tell your friends about us, that kind of a thing. What's our next episode coming up?
I think our next episode is your pick. You get to pick this next week. So what movie are you picking for us?
I am picking The Dead Don't Die, the latest release from director Jim Jarmusch, starring Bill Murray, Adam Driver, and Tilda Swinton.
And Selena Gomez.
Yes, and Selena Gomez.
Really the only reason
apparently in
I
it.
was interested in seeing the film.
It's funny, we both have very different movie tastes and musical tastes, because her musician driver is Selena Gomez for this. I was pumped because Tom Waits and Iggy Pop are in the actual icons. Tom Waits and Iggy Pop are in the movie. Selena Gomez not at icon status yet.
Such an icon.
I'm not going to rule it out for later on, but she hasn't been around enough yet to be an icon.
Doesn't matter, she's awesome.
Either way, you can see us in the next episode talking about The Dead Don't Die. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the movies.